Hi, I am Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. Today, I have one of my most favorite guests who, at one time, was actually helping me get commissioners on the program, and now she is one, Pat Kemp. What a wonderful thing to have you on the show with me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always good to see you. We always have some great conversation and a look at what we're doing in Hillsborough County. So I
You know,
appreciate coming on.
one of the things that I particularly like is the fact that you were a county aide to a BOCC member. And that gave you the experience and background on working with your constituents, searching out items, getting things one on one with people. And so many people come into public office with really no background in the office. They just had enough money to run for it or the desire to run for it, or somebody said, hey, you need to do this. But it's kind of nice to have somebody that's worked in the trenches, if you will, and worked their way into the position you're in.
Yeah, I think it was helpful. I was an aide to Kathy Castor when she was a county commissioner for 3 years. I was also actually an aide to a state representative in Tallahassee for a couple years. And I think all that served me well for kind of, learning the ropes a little and expectations and managing, uh, how to do things. Actually, some of my best training though was quite honestly as a community activist for decades,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think that really helped me to understand how the system works and kind of how to uh, plug in to different powers that be. So all of that it helped me a lot. It gave me a real depth when I was first elected. It didn't amount to much when I was first elected because for the first 2 years, I quite often had a hard time even getting a second. And I had a number of votes where they were 1 to 6. But but uh, but that's all changed now. And I remember in 2018 when I first had some colleagues that thought a whole lot like me, that I started hearing second, and I was like, "Oh, this is
Oh,
great!
wait, it'll
This
get
is a
voted
new
on.
day." But we were still moving back and forth, trying to get, never quite necessarily. Sometimes having 4 votes, sometimes not. And I think that is more solidified this time with our two new commissioners again. So the composition of the county commission has changed quite drastically, not just by party, 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And I am county commission, very different vision for the future of Hillsborough County than in the past.
Well, I think one of the things that I really have that we could make a law that required every one of those county commissioners that 4 to 5 thousand homes to be built in Waimama and that whole area to have to live over there and then have to go into Tampa at least once a day to try and get through the traffic. It's really affecting a lot of the other areas like Sun City Center.
I wish too. It's really a shame that these commissioners don't have to feel the consequences of their actions. They can just make these decisions, and on it rolls. And Hillsborough County has been historically an outlier from any county in the state of Florida, as I've discovered. And you said 15 or 20 years. I think we can go back 30 or 35
Oh, I'm
years.
sure, but I wasn't here then.
No, yeah, I understand. And I was here, I moved here in 85, but when I got on the county commission, I knew there was like a problem about impact fees not being, um, high enough to pay for the impacts that they were causing. What shocked me and what had no idea is that the impact fees were outlandishly, incredibly low. Like, you know, 10% of Pasco and Polk and Manatee counties and Collier and Lee counties, which were all very Republican counties, having growth and having these same issues. And as well, Orange and Osceola, which are comparable counties in Central Florida to the East Coast. And I was shocked. I mean, there's a certain number of impact fees. For instance, these are fees that builders have to pay to pay for the consequences of the impact of new building on communities.
rather
And
than
they do
dumping it on the taxpayers who are already there.
exactly instead of shifting it. Either by the shift is done either by forcing the taxpayers here to pay, but more often in Hillsborough County, zero, just not building any infrastructure at all. And it's really to me just uh, practically criminal. I mean, it's just horrible what's been done, and it's 30 years of bad public policy. We had impact fees for roads and transportation, as we all know, that were practically, near zero. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Especially for the rural areas. And there's a line in Hillsborough County that designates rural from urban, and they've tried everything they can to push that line, to move it, to change it. And we're having a hard time because of past policies holding it. But we had impact fees we have raised them from basically outside the rural areas, like $1,000 a home, to now going up to about $10,000. And that is more commiserate with what every place else is charging. We were not paying, shockingly, for sewer, water, and wastewater. And they ended a fee in 2014. And when I calculated it out and saw how much we lost, we had lost 100 million in sewer and wastewater fees from
Wow.
2014 to now. And I got the new commission just recently to bring that fee back. We were under, aside from that, we were undercharging for sewer and wastewater by half. And we were putting it, unlike any other county in Florida, unlike city of Tampa, Plant City, we were putting it on the house as a tax for 20 years for people to pay outside their mortgage at 13% interest. It was crazy. And then our schools were half. They hadn't been raised in actually 16 years since I worked for Kathy Castor. And they were half of what they should be for new schools. And we couldn't build any schools because we didn't have any money.
Well, we're
I
laying off
mean,
employees. Right?
huh?
Our school system is laying off employees right and left right now.
And part of that, part of the financial problems that Hillsborough County schools are having now date back to Kathy Castor. In 2006 raised impacts fees for schools at that time. And I worked for her as her aide and followed this for a year and a half. They were $196 per house. And in Polk, Pasco, Manatee at the time, there were 4,000. We finally got them raised to 4,000, but the recession came before that happened. Then they never got touched again until I arrived there, worked on it for quite a time, and now they're back to they're up at 8,200, which is what they have been for an average house in surrounding counties. But all this time we've lost that revenue, and the school system has had to pay for. They had a lot of debt from back in the days before Kathy Castor, and now they couldn't build any new schools because they weren't accumulating money fast enough to do it. It's a legacy of debt and abuse that's been done over and over in parks, in schools, in water, wastewater, in transportation, and in fire. We couldn't build any fire stations. It was just ridiculous. We were collecting $250,000 a year in impact fees for fire stations. Tell me, it takes 10 years, a decade or more to even save up to build one fire station. It's been utterly crazy what has happened here. And it was a big fight to get these things all up.
One of the things that you talk about building new things, but it appears to me that our infrastructure is crumbling that we've already built. It may come out of a second pot, I don't know. But when you've got school systems where the air conditioning system in the building doesn't work, and you've got temperatures going into the 80s and 90s, and trying to open windows that don't open because they were built that way, or running portable air conditioners which can't be the most economical way of cooling a building. bringing the big old air conditioners in and running it. So it's not only just building new stuff, it's maintaining what we've already got.
Right. But when you're always constantly having to build the new stuff and pay the debt on it, then you can't do the maintenance. It's just never been responsibly dealt with. It's a legacy that we have, and it's a 30 to 35-year legacy that has been only for what a Ponzi scheme, truly, that has not been making new impacts pay their fair share. And then that just, reverberates throughout the whole way that we've fashioned Hillsborough County. The other part of that is really starting to look at holding the line, because we have to do infill and redevelopment in places where we already have infrastructure in place, or we can make adjustments to infrastructure rather than having to expand the infrastructure way out. Very costly, very inefficient. And it's what communities across the country are recognizing that they have to do. Even as you just say, to pay for repaving and asset preservation, preserving what we have, which for me is
Exactly.
a first priority. You first do no harm. First start to preserve what you have, because in the future, as you pointed out in the schools, but it's also true of roads and every other infrastructure you have, the more you let it deteriorate, the more impacts it has, and sometimes more costly to replace than even doing it new, because there's been such serious deterioration and a lack of upkeep of assets and infrastructure. So that is another thing that I was like, don't build anything else until you can maintain what you have.
I'm with you on that completely. That's what I'm saying. It's nice to think about building new things, but we have to maintain the things we have because the roads are constantly going out. I know here in Sun City Center, which I live in the South County, there are a lot of people here saying, well, why is there so many bumps in all of our roads? And of course, if you're driving in a golf cart that doesn't have very many springs in it, it's actually earth shattering to go over some of these spots. But the county just doesn't have the ability to go back and resurface all of this. We're talking about infrastructure there, and one of the things that I'm kind of excited about is the ferry boat that's going to be running on Tampa Bay. And I know that you were working along with that to bring it into a reality. Can you bring us up to speed on it?
I'd love to. And it's one of my uh, favorite projects, one that I've worked on before I ever even thought I would be a county commissioner as a citizen activist. And I just think it is one of the most important transportation assets that we could have in this community all over the country. When people have opportunity, they're putting in ferry systems. It's really working quite well in New York City now, where I think, upped it to something like 29 ferries now that they've just gone through in the last 6 years, and they're enormously popular and provide a fast, easy, low cost way for people to go from one place to the other, and it makes just so much sense here in Tampa Bay.
Now,
So we're looking.
where will we be? Everybody's excited, but nobody knows where we're going for sure and where we're going to park. And is there going to be a
Well,
charge for parking?
it's been a long road, and it's still out there. We haven't confirmed it. We're going to have a final vote, and so we could use help. Looks like in August, about the South County ferry in particular. But the land now, because this has been something we struggled over for several years, but just north of Apollo Beach, south of Gibsonton. There's kind of four fingers of land that come out that are dredged land there. And the northernmost is the Schultz Preserve with a port project. But there's one of those areas of land that we really wanted to have forever. And just recently, Mosaic has said that they would work with us
Oh,
to put
wow.
Terry on that piece of pretty much empty land that's out there, right by the power plant. So that would be the best. That would be the best way for me to describe where it is. It's undeveloped right now. So you have to just that's where a parking lot would be and a dock, and the ferry could go from there to St. Pete in about uh, 25 or 30 minutes, less than it takes to go from Tampa to St. Pete by ferry. And then it could go up to Tampa. It could go. The idea is to get it over to MacDill,
Yeah, that's what.
where
There's what my people out here. You should also. I'm wearing my U.S. Air Force tie. I'm going to
yeah,
another veterans meeting when we finish, and there are a lot of vets over here who have to go to MacDill to get medications and things like that. From driving from here, besides the fact that you need to take the toll road, which is going to charge you for being on it, you got about an hour and 15 minute, hour and 30 minutes, even more, depending on the traffic volume and time of day. So a lot of us would just be able to love to run over here, park the car, get on the ferry, go across to MacDill, do our business with Pass an ID or with the commissary or whatever. And I think it'd be great.
we've worked very hard with MacDill. We've worked, I brought this back again and again, and several other commissioners voted it down in the past, but we have just moved it through most recently with 6 votes, 6-1. And hopefully we'll have another vote on it. We've had a couple votes on it now. We'll have another vote on it. It's the most voted on project ever. Um, Lots of opportunities for a few commissioners to decide no. But in August, we will be bringing it back again, and then we will have to have, at that point, a sped up study that will put in place how we would build the dock, what kind of boats we would use, how the whole project would be financed, and how to, work out all the details. But we're on a faster track. It was pretty much dead in the water for a while. Now with our new commission, we've, been able to bring it back, and it would be we could have it up. We could have had it up and operating a few years ago had it just gone smoothly, but it hasn't. So hopefully in about 3 years, we could have an operational ferry service from South County, which is so important, as you know, and everybody down there. When I'm in South County, people are bursting at the seams, begging for opportunities for other ways to move in the area, in Hillsborough County and in the region. And it's just, it's that this has been so difficult when the costs are so relatively low compared to any other form of transit or transportation that you can use, because you don't have to build roads, and then you have no congestion. you know and it's even recognized by the federal government as fixed guideway transportation.
Well,
So
does the Pinellas County Commission have to vote on this too? I assume they're
Well,
part of
here's how
the
there's
overall.
two different ferry services. And the original one that we were trying to do was South County to MacDill. That was the original service, a
Okay.
commuter service that we originally intended when we started bringing this forward,
Just
2013,
that
2014.
part of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Then, as part of that, it was that the boats could be used at night to go between Tampa and St. Pete, but that was supposed to be the more iffy part of it, that, we didn't know if would work quite, or be that we knew that it couldn't be commuter service because there's not very many people commuting between those two places. So we started that service, ended up starting as a pilot service. People were asking for it, and it has gone crazy, way beyond any expectations that we ever had. Theory selling out, night after night. People just, it's just been an incredibly successful service. It has, as a pilot program, 6 months a year, one boat, which means you can't do that much service. But it had 5 groups supporting it, doing equal shares, and that was Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, St. Pete City, Tampa City, and FDOT, to do this, support the 6 month ferry service. On the part of us, it's cost about 1.2 million to do that every 6 months. But if you were paying that 1.2 million and into a fund, to fund ferry service. We could have that funding for ferries for the next, over amortized over the next 20 years, a four ferry service between all the counties and set up the docks and everything. But I don't think we're gonna need them to be partially supportive, but they're very supportive over there for a pro rata part of that ferry service. That's the way it's going to work out. But I think the in at this point, Hillsborough County has raised its hand, and we said we'll take over and start to move the ferry project underneath the county from Tampa to St. Pete, and then start working on the South County to McDill.
I'm assuming you have the support of McDill.
Oh, McDill has been all over this all along. I had
Is that
several
with any
meetings.
federal money?
Well, the contribution, the way it works with McDill is that people get transit vouchers, transportation vouchers that they can use to drive or to take a ferry. And so
Oh,
that's the contribution in the way that McDill does their contribution to the ferry service. And that's pretty substantial because it's a really base of support for HMS, that is the operator. And the way that this works, unlike everything else, where any transit in the country, I know of no transit in the country where we have a private operator who's operating it without us paying them costs. So HMS, which is the largest ferry provider in the U.S. And maybe the world, but they do the ferries in New York and Seattle. They are setting up a ferry service in Puerto Rico now. All over the country, they have ferry projects. So they have said that for the next 20 years, that they will uh, take the operating costs, so we don't have to subsidize any operating costs. Our costs are going to be building the docks and
oh,
purchasing the ferries,
well,
which
they
is
have to believe in it then.
yeah, oh yeah. They had to, and one of the things that made them believe in it was the pilot project, which they didn't expect to be so successful, between Tampa and St. Pete, which has had ridership, numbers that have been like nothing they projected, how popular it's been. And
Well,
so we'd like to expand that too.
Phyllis and I did get an opportunity to ride on that one time that they brought it out, and that was quite interesting. We learned a lot.
Yeah, I just went actually last week on the ferry during the day with some, uh, representatives, the new representatives at McDill now, and they're all about it and excited about it. But a few years ago, the Greater Tampa Chamber of Commerce, I guess it's called Tampa Bay Chamber now, came to my office and wanted to talk to me. And I thought they might be upset about some things I had done. And they sat down and they said, we've just met with McDill. And they said, we asked McDill, what's the project? What can we help them with? How can we work with them closer, to help them? And the chamber said, they told us their number one project, and this was back in 2017, is the ferry. So, we have all the chambers on board with this. We have McDill totally on board with this. We have all this, all over the county. I'm asked about it more than any other thing, even if I don't bring it up.
Well,
Truly.
it's pizzazz. It's unique and it's different. It's different than potholes or building another lane on an expressway. Pat, we're almost done as far as the amount of time we have together. Is there something that I haven't brought up that you would particularly like to get out?
Well, I just like to say that another thing that I'm really been working on is our renewable energy profile and greening up Hillsborough County. And I was successful in getting us to set aside $5 million to put solar panels on our libraries and fire stations and other projects in the county, go to LED lighting in all our parks, look at hybrid fleet. We'll be having our first electric buses at Heart. So we are moving the needle on all these projects and we're going to continue to go down that road in every way possible because it's a road that makes sense for great green jobs, and lower costs for taxpayers for operations and all these buildings. And I'm very proud that we're pushing forward that way.
When we were in Germany, almost every house had a solar panel. I began looking at solar panels, not for myself, but thinking about whether it's good or bad. And now I guess the average lifespan on a good solar panel is 30 years.
Exactly.
And then I looked up to see where the United States was and going green in the rest of the world. We're 37th.
Yes.
37th. I mean, how can that possibly be? All the people want to make America great again. I mean, everybody ought to be behind this to make us a leader instead of us
Right.
having to buy solar panels from China.
Exactly. I
What
couldn't agree
happened
with
to our
you more.
lead? Why are we not doing this?
We are now, I think, making starting to make a step in that. And Florida, of course, has been behind the rest of the nation. I mean, we were being beat by Massachusetts and New Jersey for a long time. I'm happy that TECO, which basically is a footprint that serves Hillsborough County a little bit more, will be is moving about 20% solar by 2023, which is good, and it's moving in that direction because it makes sense, because it's less costly for them than anything else. So hopefully we'll see those panels go up. We'll get cleaner air and lower cost energy prices for the future. So I think that that's a great thing. And then of course the impacts of climate change, which we're ground zero for sea level rise. We need to be ground zero for a renewable future.
And it only makes sense. It really does. We've got everything we need here we've got sunshine, we've got reasonable weather, we've got everything we need. I have always said that somewhere along the line, when new houses are built, they should have to be built to a green standard where the infrastructure of the house is such that they've got decent insulation in it, the windows, and even now I've been looking at some of the roofs that people are putting in, and some of those roofs are actually solar panels. And if you get 30 years out of a solar panel and that becomes your roof, it's better than a shingles roof, which is only going to get 16 to 18.
Right, right. Now there's a lot of innovation, and the costs are going down, and the efficiencies are going up. And for Florida, it's certainly the way to go, more than anything else. I mean, instead of importing $38 billion a year in fossil fuels from other states and nations, it's time for us to use our own energy source and capture that.
Pat Kemp, you've been a great guest. Board of County Commissioners. What term are you now doing?
My second term. They're 4-year terms, and you can run for 2, and then your term limited out. So I have 3.5 more years to go.
Well, for me, that's another argument that I'll sit down and have with anybody. I don't like term limits. I can't imagine any company having to fire their CEO because he's been there for 4 years.
Right,
That
right.
doesn't make sense, especially if they're doing a good job. Pat, thank you so much for being with us. I'm Bill Hodges. This has been Spotlight on Government. You're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself so often because you are, And again, Pat, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.